Take charge of your leadership development. Join our How to Take the Lead Substack community for bonus materials, exclusive content, and discussions that will challenge and change the way you lead. Visit howtotakethelead.com to find out more.
I was waiting for the next bit, and I was like, no, she's finished. I love it. That's all you need to do.
You're listening to How to Take the Lead with Lee Griffith
and Carrie-Anne Wade.
Two corporate colleagues turned business besties who question everything we've ever learned about leadership.
What started with us putting the world to rights over a gin after work is now a weekly show challenging the myths and perceptions and exploring what leadership looks like in the modern day.
We'll also be sharing our experiences and stories along the way.
You can find our show notes at howtotakethelead.com.
Hit subscribe to receive new episodes every Thursday.
Plus, we'd love for you to rate or leave a review of the show.
And please share your thoughts and stories on the topics we cover using the hashtag HowToTakeTheLead.
Hello, welcome to this episode of How to Take the Lead, episode 11. How has that happened, Lee?
I know. This is our longest run ever of a Take the Lead style episode, isn't it?
I know, I can't believe it. We've gone from Instagram lives to a podcast to almost being on a 12 episodes of it. I'm feeling a bit astounded by how quickly this has all whizzed by, but I'm not astounded by how much we've had to talk about.
No, and that's the thing. We could easily just keep going and going and going, but we will need a break at some point.
We will need a break. Other people probably might like a break from us for a bit, but people need not fear. I'm sure we'll be back for series 2 because plenty has come up in what we've talked about that we want to explore even further. But for today's episode, I just wanted to explore a little bit the notion of trust in leadership and what that really means, why it's important. But it's something that we do talk about a lot when we have conversations about what it means to be a leader. We talk about building trusted relationships with people, whether that's your own team, whether that's your organization, whether that's your clients, that need to really develop and nurture and build those trusted relationships. And we also talk a lot, I think, not just you and I in How to Take the Lead, but when other people talk about leadership, about the need for people to have trust in you as a leader. So I guess it's on that basis that I pose this first exploratory question, which is, what do we really mean when we talk about trust and leadership? And more importantly, why is it important?
Yeah, I talk a lot about connection when I'm doing my work, from just normally day-to-day stuff that I do. I talk a lot about connection. For me, connection and trust are hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. And I think that's why it's so important in leadership, because for me as a leader, it's how you get things done. So it's how you take people with you as a leader, and you only take people with you if they feel connected to you, and they only feel connected to you if they trust you. So of course, you can get delivery and stuff in other ways, but that is likely to only be for a time. It's likely to be messy. It's likely to be storing up problems for the future. And so for me, I think you can't have a productive, high-performing, however you want to look at it, organisation without having an element of trust. I think we also know that if staff trust their leaders, then we know they're likely to be more loyal to the leader and the organisation. They're likely to give more to the role, and they're likely to give more to the organisation as well. So fostering a culture of trust is a really important way to build the organisation whole. There was a study done that's cited quite a lot by Professor Paul Zak around the neuroscience of trust. And he was saying that compared to low trust companies, people at high trust companies reported 74% less stress, 106% more energy at work, 50% higher productivity, 13% fewer sick days, 76% more engagement, 29% more life satisfaction, not just work satisfaction, life, and 40% less burnout. So there's so many elements of what you're trying to achieve in the workplace gets achieved by building trust.
Yeah, oh my goodness, they're really powerful statistics, aren't they? And there's a bit of me that hopes you were reading those out, Lee, and that you didn't just have all of those memorised in your head, because I was like, blimey, this is This is full on, but you are absolutely right. It's so linked to the culture of the organization that you're creating, isn't it? When we think about building that trust as a leader, and it is having that positive culture where people trust you, but also that you trust people to do their job. I think that's a big
Yes.
thing as well, that
Yes.
people feel empowered and therefore more able to perform well and carry out what their role is because they are trusted to do so, and that will have that impact that you talked about on performance, productivity, staff morale, sickness, retention as well. So I think that is a really important part of it. It's not just about people trusting in you as a leader, but it's about you trusting in other people, that they are there to do the right thing and that you are empowering them to get on with it and do their job. And I'm sure we've all had those experiences of being micromanaged by leaders who clearly find it very difficult to trust people for whatever reason. And I guess there's lots of drivers for that. People can be wanting to be very controlling and think they're the only people that know how to do something, for example. But by not putting that trust in other people to do the job that they're there actually to do, you're really doing a disservice to them, and you're not helping people to develop and grow either as individuals in the workplace or elsewhere. So yeah, I think as we're talking, it's really clear that that whole notion and concept of trust in leadership is a really important one and has potentially huge impacts for your whole organization.
Yeah. I mean, you're completely right. Trust goes both ways. It isn't just about people trusting you, it is about you demonstrating trust. And I think that micromanaging is a really good example. I think you've also got things like perhaps if you're someone who might bitch a bit about members of your team to other members of your team, that breaks trust of people because they'll see, well, if they're saying this about that person, what are they saying about me? If you're not standing up and protecting your team, perhaps, or if you're taking all the credit for what your team have done, all of those are examples of where you're breaking your trust in your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that erodes, doesn't it? That sense of being part of a team. So yeah, absolutely important. So I know we'll, as we carry on through this conversation, keep reflecting back on some of this. And the point you made, it goes two ways. Trust is a reciprocal thing and often something that has to be developed over time. It's not
Mm,
something that happens overnight. I think back to, like, if you're a new leader stepping into an organization, you have to prove to people why they should trust you and why they should engage with you and want to come with you on that journey towards your ultimate vision, because they don't know you. So you can't
no,
expect to step in somewhere and be like, right, I'm new, you must all trust me and I trust you, and let's just, move on happy ever
yeah.
after. It is something that you need to build.
It's a cliche, but that's that sentiment of it takes a long time to build trust, but can take moments to break trust. And I think one of the issues that some leaders have is that they think trust equates with power and seniority, and that there's a given expectation that people will trust you because, or should trust you because
Because of
you
your
are more
role.
senior.
Mm.
And I think that's almost a myth that we need to break from the off.
And we've touched on that. You've said it takes a long time to build that trust, but only seconds to break it. But I'm interested in your thoughts, Lee, about how you do go about building trust as a leader. Like we've said, it's linked to culture, it's very much linked to values and the values that you demonstrate and the values of your organization and others. If you're in that leadership space, what is it that you have to do? What is it that you have to demonstrate to help start building that trust?
I think for me, it starts with integrity and demonstrating integrity linked very closely to your values, but it's that doing what you say and what you believe in and actually taking actions on the things that you talk about. So if you're inauthentic, people are going to see through that and the trust and that connection will go. I think if we look at it from a communications perspective, we've seen those leaders who have people write stuff for them or manage their social media accounts for them or whatever. If they don't get a tone of voice that's right or consistent with the person that people encounter in meetings or when they're walking down a corridor, then you've lost trust and connection again. So there's something about integrity, authenticity in the way that you behave. I hate the word soft skills, you know that by now, I'm sure. But I think if you're working on those areas, so empathy, listening, communication, as we've mentioned, all of those elements all contribute to trust in some way, building trust. And I think we've slightly touched on this already, but that sense of you've got to take your ego out of the equation. So you need to center what you say and what you do around what people need, what other people need, and not make it all about you. And all of those come together over time and with consistency, then people will start to build that trust. It's that
Yeah.
like trust, isn't it? We talk about that
Yeah.
from a marketing sense. Got to get to know you, they've got to get to like you, and then the trust will come.
Yeah, I think I'm just reflecting on what you're saying around some of that. There's definitely something for me about actually role modeling the sorts of behaviors that you would like to see in your organization, and you're taking the actions that you would like other people to be able to take. So for me, that is an important part of it. It's that taking action. I think it is the bit that people want to see. They don't want leaders who say all of the right things in the room, but then like nothing actually ever happens. The right things never then seem to have action taken upon them. So there's definitely something for me around demonstrating through action that you mean what you've said. And I think that's an important part of building that trust as a leader for sure. And I think for me, in terms of building trust, it is, I guess, that acceptance of it taking time, and that you talked about the know, like, trust. Not everybody's going to necessarily like you. Not everybody's going to want to be your friend, and you have to be able to accept that. But that doesn't mean that you can't take the right actions to enable those people to trust you. And I think that's quite an important part of that journey as a leader. And I liked what you said about you have to take the ego out of it, because you have to remind yourself that as a leader, you're not there for you. You're there for everybody else. And I think there are certain types of leaders who forget that. And it is all about raising their own profile, supporting their own ego-driven activities. And I think it's really important, if you want people to trust you, for you to be able to demonstrate that you're there for them. You're there to lead them. You're not there just to lead yourself. So definitely something important to reflect on.
Getting to CEO level is not easy. Staying there is harder still. The average UK CEO tenure is less than 5 years. Meanwhile, 50% of executives don't make 18 months in post. That's why it's essential you don't leave those first days and weeks in your dream job to chance. Being intentional with what you see, say and do is a must-have first step if you're going to make the right impact. With the 100-day plan, I help you get clear on your big vision, set a strategy that connects, and the communications plan to deliver it. Using my 6 steps to make an impact framework, you'll have intensive one-to-one support, blending coaching, strategy days, and done with you consulting, as well as my expert eye on all your messaging and communications. Visit sundaysskies.com to find out more.
If you're enjoying this episode of How to Take the Lead, please hit subscribe, and why not leave a review or rating. We'd also love to hear your stories and thoughts on today's topic. Please DM us, our links are in the show notes, or tag us into your socials using the hashtag How to Take the Lead. We've mentioned as well in conversation already about performance and kind of high performing teams, and how trust and culture and having that culture of trust in your organisation has an impact on productivity and performance. But I just wanted to explore that from a slightly different angle, I guess, and probably more about individuals. So we've often seen in business over the years lots of metrics for measuring performance, and high performance, low performance, lots of processes that get put in place to deal with low performance. But I think it's something that we reward, or that we have traditionally rewarded a lot as leaders. People who are high performers get rewarded. But I'm quite interested in that relationship between performance and trust. And I'm not going to do this justice. It's a Simon Sinek, and I don't know if anybody will have ever seen this clip already on YouTube. Or pop it in the show notes. But Simon Sinek talks about performance and trust in individuals and in leaders. And he gives an example around Navy SEALs, where he's worked with Navy SEALs to talk to them about what they determine as more important around that performance and trust piece. And what has come out of some of what Simon Sinek says is that when you have individuals who are very high performance, but actually very low trust, that can lead to a sense of toxic leadership. And again, I guess in terms of what we've talked about, that's like, what are you in it for? Is that leader just there to perform and deliver for their own purpose? Then they're not building that connection and that trust with people. But he also said when he spoke with Navy SEALs that in terms of the people that they most want in their team, the people that they most want to have on their side are people who are high trust, but actually their performance doesn't necessarily need to be high. They could be medium level performance, but very high trust. And for them, they feel like those people are the most gifted natural leaders because they are able to take people with them on that journey, build those trusted relationships. So I'm just interested in your take on the performance versus trust, or trust and performance dynamic when it comes to leadership.
It's a really interesting finding. And I suppose if I think about when we've talked about leadership previously and the fact that you don't need to be the expert in everything, it's about building a team that's got the different skills and stuff. I suppose it resonates with that concept, doesn't it? That you don't have to, if high performance equals high skill, for example, that doesn't need to be a prerequisite to be a leader, but trust does. I do think there's something for me, though, about low performance doesn't breed trust either. I know I would be less trusting of someone if I didn't think they had their head in the game in the right way or were incompetent or something like that. So there is balance, isn't there? There is a level of what's acceptable in terms of performance, but I agree it doesn't necessarily need to be that super high performance. And I wonder, you mentioned about the metrics and people measuring performance and stuff like that. And I suppose performance in and of itself is a measure of trust, because over time, yes, you can have short, sharp interventions with someone who's low trust that might get things done, but over time, that wouldn't be sustainable. And you'll see low performance, you'll see low morale, you'll see all of the things that we spoke about at the beginning. So for me, if you've got sustained good performance in your organization and you've got good morale, good customer feedback, good operational performance, all of that type of stuff, I do think that shows a sign that things are going the right way when it comes to trust.
Yeah, I think that's sort of partly answered what my next question might have been, which is around, if we can measure for performance, how do you measure for trust? But they're probably so linked over time that actually they are indicators of each other, because organisationally, I think you would, like you say, you wouldn't necessarily get that sustained high performance if there wasn't a level of trust within the organisation. I guess the bit for me in terms of what I was thinking is there something missing there? Is it as cut and dry as performance and trust are the only two things that you need to kind of be thinking of when you're thinking about kind of how colleagues feel about working in the organisation and how much they trust you as a leader? And I think there's a couple of interesting ways to look at it, isn't there? Is it about your performance as a leader, or is it about the performance of everyone else in the organisation, and how does trust impact on that, I guess? But I think I quite liked your insight about looking at it over a period of time. It's that level of sustainability. It can't just be about those short, sharp interventions. But I guess I'm not sure, on that point that Simon Sinek raised around, businesses seem to value high performance and reward it. I'm not sure how you would reward high trust and how you would recognise that was there as part of your organisation.
I think you could, whilst it's not perhaps explicitly expressed, I do think that there would be measures in your organisation that shows that you've got high trust. So it could be, I don't know, looking at your staff survey results. So how do people feel about working there or working for their manager and leader is a sign of, if they don't want to work there, or they don't want to work with their line manager, trust is probably something at play there. So I think things like that are really good measures. I think there's also then, if your customer satisfaction's low, or customer experience is low, or you get bad feedback around areas of that, then there's a trust issue potentially between your staff and your customers. So then again, is that a bigger issue organisationally because your staff aren't giving a great experience to the people that they are there to serve? That's easy for me to say. So I don't think you necessarily need to create an extra metric that is what is the trust level in this organisation. I think there are metrics that you can already use. It goes back to that thing we always say about triangulation. You probably need a range of different metrics and measure it over time, and it will give you a really good picture around how people are feeling. I think trust also, again, is situational. So people might say, well, yeah, I trust you to do this, but I wouldn't trust you to do that. So it depends on what the scenario is as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll probably touch on some of that in the next bit of the conversation about that situational piece, because I guess there's something for me when we talk about trust and leadership around what happens building trust, why it's important, how do you do that as a leader, and how that link between trust and performance has an impact on teams. So you're thinking about how you're building a trusted team. But there's a bit of the picture for me that hopefully isn't something that everyone who's a leader will experience, but that some people probably will. And we can probably name some individuals that are very prominent in the public eye at the moment that are going through this. But what do you do when you've lost that trust as a leader? You know, it might be that you've handled a situation really poorly, you haven't dealt with a crisis very well, for example. Like, what happens when that trust is gone as a leader? And is there a way to rebuild it?
Mm.
I'm just interested in your thoughts around that, Lee.
I mean, it is very situational. I think it depends on what's happened, and your response to what's happened are the key indicators, aren't they, in terms of whether you lose trust and can regain trust. If something bad happens and personally or as an organisation, you're in a situation where you need to demonstrate a response to that in some way, if you apologise, you demonstrate you're taking the right actions, your words match the actions that you take, and you come from a humble place of learning and forgiveness and all that, then I think people can rebuild that trust in you over time because you're demonstrating what you've said you're going to do. I think if you are in a bad situation, and we've seen this with our lovely leaders in government recently, where you're in a bad situation and you make it worse because you double down on what's happening and your apologies are inauthentic, or you just go and keep doing the same thing over and over again. So you're just demonstrating you actually don't give a shit what anyone thinks about you. Then it gets to a breaking point where people go, look, enough is enough. You're not demonstrating humility. You're not demonstrating that you're actually taking this seriously. You're not demonstrating that you want to see change, and therefore, bye bye, mate, we don't want to see you anymore. So I think it depends on what that situation is. I think it depends on how you choose to respond to it. I do think it's possible that you can do really hard things as a leader and keep trust. We talk about whether it's mergers, closures, job losses, all of those types of things, really, really tricky situations. I think you can manage those effectively as a leader and still keep trust. But the key to that is that you're communicating, you're really transparent, you're listening to people, you're getting people involved, you're helping them to understand the bigger picture and all of that. So sometimes when those areas are missing, that's when I think it's really hard to get back.
And as you're talking there, I'm thinking it's about demonstrating, you mentioned humility, supporting people. It's about demonstrating all the things that are good about being a human, isn't it? And being compassionate and being able to put yourself in those other people's shoes. And while you might not always be able as a leader to make that outcome different, so you talk about job losses, mergers, you might not be able to make the outcome any different for whatever reason, usually financially driven, but actually you can make the person's experience of going through that process a better one for them, that is more compassionate and that is more tailored to supporting them. And I guess I liken that to the example with P&O that happened, and how terribly as an organisation that was handled, and how actually all of those staff members who lost their jobs, they would have still lost their jobs, but they might have had a very different view about P&O as an organisation if that situation had been handled very differently. So I guess for me, there is also that link between trust and reputation, whether that's your organisational reputation or your reputation as a leader. And you mentioned politics. That's always a place to start when you're looking at, I was going to say looking at trust, but I guess looking at leadership. But, you know, interestingly, the current Prime Minister, Boris, has been in that position where his own party has lost trust in him, and he's hung on for as long as he possibly could. And now we know what the outcome of that is. But even though, you know, in our conversations, we've often used him as an example of not being a great leader, there will still be people out there who are in support of him. So how does that work?
Who just, I don't know if they forgive, but they just see it as part of his character, and they are willing to oversee that for the bigger picture that he offers, which is a really interesting concept when it comes to trust. I wonder whether they would feel the same if they were working for him, though. So is it proximity to the person and the relationship that's important?
Yeah, again, and that's back to that situational piece, isn't it? What situation are you in? Maybe they wouldn't feel the same if they were more directly impacted by some of the decisions that he's made as well. So that is quite an interesting one, isn't it? And it is about that character piece, isn't it? And that likability, and back to that trust, how much you like somebody sometimes might outweigh how much you think trust in them is important in certain situations. But I guess carrying on that example slightly, just to round off this bit of the discussion, for someone as a leader who maybe has lost that trust in them, in their organisation, and perhaps hasn't been able to rebuild that, and I mentioned that link with reputation, can you move on from that? Where do you go from there, and how do you learn from that? So when you step into your next space, that you're not just continuing and you're not taking that reputation as somebody who's untrustworthy with you.
I think that's down to you as an individual, isn't it? And the inner work that you are willing to do. So if you are genuinely want to move on, and you're going to take the time to learn, you're going to take the time to reflect, you're going to take the time to make sure you do things differently next time, you just will. If you're someone who actually just doesn't care, you're not going to, and you're just going to keep perpetuating the same scenarios and situations. And we see that with some leaders where they go from place to place to place, and it's the same things. They're maybe not there very long. They may get moved on from one organisation to another organisation or whatever it might be. So it does happen, but I would suspect those people are not very self-aware, not very insightful, very ego-led. The bigger question then is for the boards who are recruiting these individuals. How are they testing for that type of stuff? How are they testing for how strong a connection they're going to make with people and how they're going to build trust?
And I think that links to a previous episode where we've talked about, and we always use inverted commas, those soft skills, haven't we? How do you recruit for people that isn't about their performance and their skill set in terms of their profession, but is more about how they're going to connect with people and build that trust and build those relationships and start to impact the culture of the organisation?
I'm trying to think of a leadership position where this has happened, but I can think of lots of celebrities that have fallen from grace, fallen in disgrace. Well, I don't know what the phrase is, but they put up on a pedestal, something happens, they lose the trust of people. You think, oh, that's it, that's their career shot. But then they make an almighty comeback and everyone loves them and they're the sweetheart again. So that redemption story is possible if you're willing to be authentic, own up and do the work.
Yeah. And again, probably in those scenarios, a bit about people's likability, isn't it? Because if you really like someone, you root for them more to turn it around, and you want to believe that they're going to be able to come back from a difficult time, and you want to believe that they're going to be able to rebuild that trust. So again, back to that point that it's reciprocal in terms of it has to go both ways when you're talking about trust. I was slightly sidetracked there in my head thinking, oh, I hope I haven't got a fall from grace coming and I need to have my own redemption story. But your tips around thinking about learning from that, I think, is the important part, isn't it? And sadly, there'll be people who don't want to because they're not really that bothered that people don't trust them and somehow can move from role to role without that really being an issue. But I think then you have to question why you want to be a leader in the first place if you're not really that bothered about it.
Are you just a manager of something, a project, and you're not actually a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've gone from why is trust important, how you build trust as a leader, that link between performance and trust and whether that's a genuine one that's there or not. And then that fall from grace, how you rebuild trust or if you even can. So it's been a quick canter through the concept of trust and leadership, but an important one, I think, because we talk about it quite a lot. I feel like we've got to that point in the conversation where we should share some takeaways and top tips. So what would yours be, Lee, if you're a leader who's thinking about this topic of trust and how you can build that?
I think let's just keep it really simple. I think that the starting point of building trust is being authentic and walking the talk. And it is as simple as that, isn't it? You have really clear, consistent communication, do what you say you're going to do, and don't get wrapped up in ego.
I love that. Was so concise. I was waiting for the next bit, and I was like, no, she's finished. I love it. That's all you need to do. And I guess we've said keep it simple, but I think it's recognise that it takes time and recognise that you will have to put effort in to build those trusted relationships. They're not going to fall into your lap on day one of taking on a leadership role, but absolutely agree with your top tips, Lee. And I think that's all about acting with integrity as a leader. Thanks again for listening to today's episode.
Don't forget to hit subscribe so you're the first to receive new episodes when they drop every Thursday.
If you enjoyed the show, we'd love it if you would rate it or leave a review.
And let us know your thoughts and own experiences.
Get in touch with either of us on LinkedIn, Twitter or Instagram.
Or use the hashtag #HowToTakeTheLead.
Until next week, get out there and take the lead.